Okay, we are broadcasting, and I am just waiting to make sure we have a good connection with the public and that all are here. I will defer to Councilor Agaman for the start of the meeting.
Andy, point of order. You have a number of people who should be panelists that are in the participant in the attendee section.
Yeah,
I was one. And
I'm actually doing that at this present time. Thank you.
Okay, sure.
Yep. Yeah, sorry for those folks that are just joining us. Just a moment to start our meeting.
All right, looks like it's being populated now. So let's see. Well, first, let me take roll of the voting members. So I know Councilor Connell is absent. Councilor Zeed.
Here.
Here, Zeed is here. Councilor Shand.
Present.
And Macaulay.
Yes, here.
And I'm here. So Igerman, I'm here. Okay, so that we're here, and it looks like Sasaki folks have not met everybody, but so I'll rattle off some of the names so they know. Kim Turner is the chair of our Parks Commission. Lisa Reed is our Parks Director. John Eric White is the city engineer. Mayor Holliday, you know, and I think that's it for participants. And please go right ahead.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Is that you're all set for us then?
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you, folks. So my name is Andy Port. I'm the Director of Planning and Development for the city. We have some folks in the audience, of course. I think most of us up here in the panelist group, the staff, consultants, and committee members know each other generally. So we're here tonight to hear from Sasaki Associates and some of their team about the progress that they've made thus far in getting site analysis for the Central Waterfront Market Landing Park project, and then to look at some of their opportunities and constraints that we know are applicable to this particular project. So we have the committee members here, obviously, tonight. We have Mayor Holliday and the members of Sasaki. Kate and Letitia, do you want to just introduce yourselves?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. I'm Kate Took. I'm a landscape architect and design principal with Sasaki. Letitia, I'll tag you.
I'm Letitia Torme, also a landscape architect at Sasaki and serving as the project manager for the park expansion.
Great, thank you. So tonight's agenda, this is a rough timeline we're going to follow here this evening. So approximately 20 minutes will be a presentation from a few introductory slides for myself and then Sasaki giving you the background that they've got. And then we'll have about 40 minutes or so of discussion where we'd like to hear from you if there's anything that we think you think we've missed for any reason. And these are basically all the considerations that we want to make sure Sasaki as our design consultants have in mind as they do the park design in the coming weeks and months. So that's what that 40 minutes will be devoted to, more or less. And then after that, we'd like to have a brief recap of where we're going in next steps. So we'll speak to that as well towards the end of the slides.
Andy, I neglected to say, so during the discussion, we do have attendees tonight, so I'm going to try and take some public testimony, fit that in. And also, if you could please add Elizabeth Harris as a participant. Elizabeth is one of the settlers of the trust and will be taking her late husband's seat.
Yes, Elizabeth, my apologies. I have just promoted you to the panelist status.
Andy, could you also go to full screen for the slides? If you hit Control L, it will pop to full screen and people will see the.
Oh yeah, sure.
Larger.
Yeah, sorry about that. I actually end up doing an alternate version of that, partly by the way that we run our Zoom meetings, so that's actually partly intentional, but I will do the read mode at least for that for now.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Andy, just another point of order. Matt Penziak is in attendees.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll try to keep an eye on that. If anybody else happens to appear for any reason, please let me know. Yeah.
Thank
So at any rate, There's a little bit of history here. We're not here this evening to talk about the history of the Central Waterfront. A lot of you who are here this evening probably know that history. But obviously the slide in the middle here, we just wanted to point out is this is actually just a snapshot of a video that someone had posted on YouTube, but it's an old video. Great background on the history of our downtown and the Central Waterfront clearing. And that graphic just shows in a little bit of overlap the area that we're talking about. So this area was cleared some time ago, and that history is rich and interesting, but it's not for tonight. But what is important to note here is that urban renewal cleared that waterfront for buildings and development. And there were decades of essentially the status quo parking lots within that area, and partially the creation of Market Landing Park. And we are now completing that project. So for some period of time, there was a need for consensus once those buildings were cleared as to what would happen. And of course, we have Market Landing Park as it is today, but we have not completed it. And so we now have the ability to move forward into completion of this project. I do want to give credit to a number of other folks who were involved in a lot of process leading up to today, and really the reasons why we have the ability to do what we're doing today and designing, coming to final design and construction of this park at long last is because of a couple of things that I think are worth noting. One is the 1980 stipulation and settlement of ways that provided some consensus and settlement over contiguous and continual public access to the waterfront. The 1991 creation of the Waterfront Trust to oversee those ways and the Central Boardwalk. The 2017 Council Resolution and Framework Plan, and I've just put a little snapshot of that on the corner of the slide here. And following that, the special act and dissolution that was in 2020 to dissolve the redevelopment authority. And that also makes reference to the council's resolution for essentially a framework for resolution of these issues on the waterfront and getting us forward towards where we are now, which is a framework plan for the waterfront. So I also think it's worth noting that in 2019, we completed the Newburyport parking garage, the Titcomb Street parking garage, and that it was necessary for us to shift some of the footprint of parking off the Central Waterfront without having any adverse effect on businesses in the downtown. So those things are all I think are worth noting because that is what it provides the framework for us here today to do what we're able to do after those decades of debate. So this right here is the so-called framework plan. This is a very rough framework plan for the elements that we expect Sasaki to help us in design for the park going forward. So this diagram was developed towards the end of the NRA's existence, and there was some overlap there, of course, and the city council president and others in the council were tremendously helpful in using this framework plan and other bullets within that resolution to clarify how things would be addressed here. And the important points that we think are worth noting here, because this is the basis for Sasaki's work, is the basic framework plan calls out a couple of things. So for instance, I'll note here, by the way, that this diagram does not correctly align for so-called Ferry Wharf Way. And I'll just point that out to folks. That's it would not necessarily be going to the central embayment here, but rather more perpendicular to the river. I just want to note that. But this plan is not the final design. This is a rough schematic plan to show where the major elements of the park would be. So what you'll see here is the bike path acting as a sort of a spine going through there. That was perceived as a separation, if you will, possible amenity there between the park wings, which are the primary elements of this park expansion we're doing on the east and west sides of Market Landing Park today. And then the remaining parking areas that would be left after the park expansion. And as noted here, we do recognize, and I think Sasaki has certainly recognized that there is a bike path, potential conflict between the bike path and the common areas of congregation in Market Landing Park, where we have a lot of our festivals. So we're cognizant, and Sasaki is cognizant, that that's something that needs to be balanced, and there will certainly be traffic calming for that, and probably folks will be walking for portions of that. But there are some segments that could be contiguous. So again, the park wings are primary, but it's also worth noting that this project does include the work involved with reconfiguring the parking areas so that they blend properly and that they work as efficiently as possible. The other component here, which is not the significant portion of this project, but it is to replace the restrooms and the visitor component along Merrimack Street. While there's not any other buildings or any structures proposed as part of this project, that we have all talked for some time about replacing the temporary bathrooms, so-called quote temporary bathrooms and visitor information that's there with something that's more permanent and belongs in terms of the overall architecture. So that framework is particularly important to us because it provides the framework for what types of overall scheme we need Sasaki to work on, and drilling down from there, all the details that they'll be presenting to us are options around that sort of general framework. The project team itself, I just want to summarize that a little bit. So we have two major components of this, obviously. The city of Newburyport, we are the primary, they're the consultant, their client here for the consultant. So Sasaki is serving us. The mayor, obviously, Councilor Reigeman is chair of the ad hoc committee. I am just the project manager and coordinator for all this process to oversee the consultants' day-to-day activities, coordinate with them in between our meetings, of course. But the role of this committee is to review what Sasaki provides us and help to provide some direction as you'll see further on in tonight's presentation of the process moving forward. On the Sasaki end, it's worth noting, as you heard earlier, we have Kate here this evening and Letitia. We have a number of other folks on their team. We're not planning to list them all off this evening, but they are our partner, and they actually have, as a firm, history developing plans for the downtown. Some of the urban renewal plans that are so important, and actually the infrastructure still exists today, our sidewalks and plazas and so forth, the bullnose and whatnot. These are plans that Sasaki had worked on some time ago. And so they have some history here with the types of improvements that are appropriate for downtown Newburyport. And so some of those urban renewal improvements are still here. With that, I just want to note that our next slide is about the design process. So this is just an overview for you of the whole process that we are following here from the beginning of Sasaki's work, really commencing this year, and then towards the end of this whole process, which will actually be construction, of course, of the park. So just to give you an idea, following along from the left side, we're right now in the site inventory phase. They are getting some final information regarding the site survey, utilities and things like that, and gathering stakeholder input. So we've had a couple of site walks out there with some key stakeholders to make sure that they have the full range of issues in mind and considerations that they should keep in mind as designers. We've covered a good amount of ground, I think, with that. But again, we're here tonight to make sure that they haven't missed anything. We have the ad hoc committee, obviously, is key as the framework for this under the chair's leadership. This concept and schematic design phase is roughly between June and September. So after this meeting tonight, we obviously, Sasaki will have some design work to be doing before they can present something to us, but they will be coming back to us with 3 concept alternatives for this Market Landing Park expansion. And this committee will help to review and refine that with Sasaki over a period of months to come up with the alternative that we prefer, and then refine that further. So we have an updated cost estimate for that and a more refined plan that can be agreed upon as the schematic design. And that schematic design from that point can then be taken to what is the second phase of a contract with Sasaki, which would be the design documentation, the actual plans, specifications, and bid documents that would go out for construction. We do have conjunction, sort of the same time frame as that. The funding source of we're compiling all the funds that are needed for construction. We currently have enough funding for design, but not necessarily for construction. And so we are efforting that right now from various different sources, as you might imagine. And we will have some basic permits that will be needed for the project, but nothing that's too substantial. This is not a particularly controversial project, I think, despite the controversial history of the waterfront we've known from the past. So the other thing I would note here is as part of this public process, and I know that Sasaki will speak to this evening, is a little more for public input on the process in terms of an online survey and the ability to submit comments online, as well as attending these meetings here. So just to keep in mind, that dotted line there in the middle, I think is worth noting. That's roughly the time frame in which this current schematic design phase will wrap up. So essentially the fall timeframe. Our goal is to have a schematic design plan that's developed sufficiently that we can come to consensus over that, so that Sasaki can provide us with a refined cost estimate for that, and materials that are suitable for presentation, not only to the public, but also for things like applications for grants. The one thing I do intend to do is to apply for a state grant for parks construction to supplement the construction budget for this, and obviously having some indication of the design of the park and its scope is helpful for that. So with that, I'd like to pass it on to Kate, who is going to run through from Sasaki end where they are.
Sure. So we wanted to start here and just make note that tonight is really about listening. It's about presenting a little bit of what we've heard so far and making sure that we have a really good understanding of the Newburyport community, the many things that you all have already considered and thought about and that inform what will make a great park at Market Landing. So we're here tonight to listen. When we next come back, we're really hoping for a robust conversation with the public as well as you all as the ad hoc committee, because we'll be bringing conceptual alternatives. And so our hope is to have a really great community dialogue at that point. And we have 3 strategies to ensure that we really can reach a broad spectrum of Newburyport voices and make an engagement process that is both meaningful and fun and interesting. So that will have 3 components. The first is a community meeting or an open house. Because of the pandemic, this is likely to be a virtual event. So something on Zoom where there's a presentation of some of the conceptual options, some live polling, and ways to provide comments and feedback right there. And then the meeting would be recorded so that others can also understand what the options are and have a way to provide their feedback. The second main way of reaching feedback will be to provide an online survey. So this is something that can be done at any time of day or night. We usually have it open for a couple of weeks, so many people can have their voices heard. And I think it's important to note that our goal there would be to ask questions like which aspect of each scheme works best, rather than asking people to choose a favorite. So you don't get people really wedded to one concept, but instead you ask them to tell you what they really like about different conceptual options. And then we, as a group, with your help as the ad hoc committee, can work to refine those into one concept that really has the best of all the things that appealed to the public and you all. And then finally, I think it will be important to engage folks in the Newburyport community who may not have heard of the open house or who may not go online and find the survey with pop-up events. And so these would be just simple tabling events, opportunities to align with existing events that are happening at the park or on just busy days downtown during the summer. Short fun feedback and awareness activities like a little selfie station with different options for which concept you like, or filling out a postcard, or doing something with sidewalk chalk to proclaim which concept and which ideas are really appealing to you. So we imagine that this 3-pronged approach will really engage a broad diversity of Newburyport residents and visitors in the design of the park and create some momentum that creates a positive buzz for you all as you move into a design that the whole community can steward with you. Next slide, Andy. So we have tonight a presentation that Letitia and I will take you through with really the preliminary site analysis. What we're trying to do here is explain what we've heard so far from you all and what we've learned so far from our examination of the many documents and the many efforts you all have undertaken for many years. So we've divided those into 4 categories. I'll talk first through program and character, and then Letitia will talk through connectivity and environment. And I think that we've summarized underneath each of these themes what we've heard from you all as sort of the big picture goals of any renovation of the waterfront park and expansion of the waterfront park. So around program, we've really heard that it's important that this be an active and inclusive year-round destination. For character, I think we've heard a lot from you all that that this really needs to be a uniquely Newburyport window on the Merrimack, a place that really captures what's special about the Newburyport, downtown Newburyport feel. For connectivity, that's really, it's capturing everything we've heard about how the waterfront needs to be stitched into downtown with great ways to access it, both pedestrian and bicycle ways to get to the park, as well as ensuring that it's still a functional waterfront that works for the local fishermen, commercial fishing operations that operate out of this area. And finally, around environment, we've heard from you that it really needs to be a resilient and sustainable edge to downtown. And so we'll examine some of the opportunities and constraints there. So next slide, Andy. And you can move on one more. So around program, I think that we've started to understand the many different programs that you all currently host at Market Landing Park. Even though it is a smaller park than what you have imagined as part of the expansion, it's still a really robust destination year-round. So over at the Custom House, the Customs House is hosting Maritime Days, and they have a lawn space in front that is rentable and is programmed with a wide variety of different kinds of events on that lawn. The Maritime Days brings boats downtown. We know that there is food surrounding the park, but particularly at the firehouse, and that really spills out with activity onto the lawn, which hosts a wide variety of waterfront festivals, concerts of different sizes and scales, as well as weekly fitness classes like yoga or other Pilates classes on the lawn. We know that you all have done a really excellent job of creating pop-up events and lawn games at the pop-up space right along the street, and that you have a really active whale watching and boat tours series of vendors that operate off the commercial side of the park. So we understand that there are really a wide variety of different kinds of things that are attracting pretty big crowds, up to about 10,000 people in certain types of crowds. So if you go to the next slide, Andy, we've arrayed just a couple of images that are sort of our building understanding of the many different kinds of events, everything from Maritime Days with its large boats to Yankee Homecoming, which really brings boats into the heart of the Merrimack and activates the waterfront. Theater in the Open, the fitness classes, and the festivals, which really inspire a wide variety of people to come lay down a blanket and chairs and enjoy the park for the whole day. If you go to the next slide, Andy. Yeah, so this section character is really our growing understanding of what's going to make this park and what already makes it a really special part of the city that captures the unique spirit of Newburyport. So if you go to the next slide, I think we know, as Andy said, Sasaki has a long history of working in Newburyport, and we were part of the effort that the city made to preserve some of the most architecturally special features of the city, and to enhance those. Our firm really helped the city establish Market Square and the In-Street Mall, as well as the original boardwalk. And so we have a really long-standing understanding and respect for what makes the city special, the textures and the architectural expressions which make it special. So we've highlighted here some of the ways that historic architecture helps to frame the site, as well as some of those really important ways to the water, which are already preserved and already bring the character of downtown all the way to the water. So the Custom House Way, Central Wharf Way, and Summerbees Way, which all exist today, are establishing that pattern of brick and granite and plantings that really bring the character of downtown all the way to the water and provide that public access. And we understand that there's an alignment for the future Ferry Wharf Way, which will come through the park and establish an additional connection there. At the same time, we've overlaid here some of the existing monuments and sculptures that really help define the park and again, create that unique spirit of Newburyport. Everything from the more historic Coast Guard monument, noting that the city is a Coast Guard city, one of 14 in the United States, and that really important identity for Newburyport, as well as things like the Fisherman's Memorial and the Memorial for Mayor Matthews. And then newer expressions of the city's culture, like the Sculpture Park, which really has sort of, it's bringing some vibrancy, it's bringing local and regional artists to highlight here on the waterfront and bringing sort of a new energy as well. So we understand that Newburyport is an evolving city. It has both historic references and sort of a modern and beating heart. And all of that needs and wants to be captured here on the waterfront. So if you go to the next slide, we just have a couple of images of the many different kinds of artwork, which are starting to inform and inspire the character. Everything from the more historic references like the Fisherman's Monument, the Mayor Matthews Memorial, and then the newer elements like the elk in the Sculpture Plaza. And if you go to the next slide, Andy, we also, I think, understand that there are so many textures to the city, which have some historic reference and that are right around this site, which can and will inform how that character lands in a new park design and the expansion of the park. So the wood, the brick, the cobble, the granite, the sparkle of the light on water, which so defines the views that people are trying to capture here. And then the really unique black pines and the textures of those iconic species along the edge of the water. Letitia, you're on mute.
Thank you, Kate. I will take us through the next two design considerations, the first being connectivity and really listening and understanding what a functional, robust waterfront that you have in Newburyport. And we've met with and walked the site with several of the stakeholders and businesses and facilities that interface with the existing park. And we've started to learn all of the operations that are key to those businesses, and some that are daily, some that are annual, some that are seasonal, and really understanding where vehicles need to access, where deliveries need to access, where public safety, harbor master facilities, the site tours of boats in the summertime, and also the restaurant facilities and how they are serviced daily, and starting to understand how all of these pieces work together with what is currently on the site and how they interface with the existing Market Landing Park. And also looking at the future bike path connection pulling through the space and where we have to consider potential conflicts between pedestrians and vehicles also, and be aware of those. So really understanding all of the stitching that needs to happen in this area. If you go to the next slide, Andy. And then these are images of what many of you know well, the building facilities, the boat facilities, restaurants, and also the operations of the Custom House, that's a functioning museum, and it also has activities that happen in the building and around the building that interface with the park as well. Go to the next slide. And the final design consideration is environment, really retaining this and enhancing it as a sustainable edge to the downtown. And we've started to look at all of the considerations that go into that, the anticipation of sea level rise on the site, the anticipation of additional tidal flooding, heat island effect with the existing paved areas, and starting to look at the really beautiful planting infrastructure that you have in place and maintaining that tree canopy, the health of it, and also starting to expand and enhance that as well. Also taking into consideration any existing flood pathways that we have in terms of Market Square. We know that there's issues there, and that water is directed through the park into the river and accommodate that, and any soil remediation that will have to take place on the site with the construction of the expanded park. So there are several existing things sustainable that are working successfully in the park, which I have just mentioned some of, but there are a lot of educational components, both historical and environmental, and opportunities for people to really learn about not only the workings of the waterfront, but pieces that retain the environmental stability of it as well. If you go to the next slide. And then the reality of what is going on and what we need to anticipate and accommodate the rising of floodwaters, the accommodation of people on the site, that the expansion of the park will certainly allow for more of a comfortable capacity for people in programming. And then also the planting tree canopy that I mentioned previously, that is sustained as the park is continued in the future. And then we can open it up more towards the question and next steps aspect of tonight.
Right. So thank you, Letitia. So what we're here tonight to do is to get a little bit more feedback from the ad hoc committee. Everyone who's here, obviously on the panelist side, but also the general public side, as the chair mentioned. So with that, I guess we would hand it back to the chair as to how you want to handle that discussion.
Yeah, sure. If anybody who's a participant or panelist, sorry, anyone who's a panelist, just raise your hand and we'll please don't be shy, and we'll spend some time with the ad hoc committee, and then we'll go to public comment. Any questions, comments? This is your early peek of how we are. Yes, Councilor Z, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I think that Andy did a good job of summarizing that those documents are obviously crucial, and I'm sure that that's come through the, going back to some of the original documents, and then the more recent things with the dissolution order and the related ad hoc order and so forth. The thing I was going to say is really something that's very important to me is a plan that allows for phasing, that will make it that much more likely that we're able to succeed in moving forward on this. I think that the funding aspect is a big, it's a big question mark. It always is until you get to it. And so, to the extent that the design can accommodate phasing without necessarily giving up too much, or hopefully anything, if we're lucky, I think that would be greatly appreciated. And that way we can kind of move into this stepwise. And as everybody knows, this has been a long time coming. So if we design something that really only works if you do it all at once, not to say it's not possible, but it just, it's much harder to maybe bite all of it off at once. So I hope you'll take that into consideration, as you design. And part of that may be working from like the inside of the park outward, so that we can do something and then not disturb it again, not have to ruin something we've done in order to be able to move forward. So I think that was my thought. And then the other one would be, I think that the ways to the water, I just want to sort of double or triple emphasize the importance of those. And some of us who are sort of veterans of the ad hoc and having worked on that sort of know where the pressure points are and things that we really don't want to reopen because it's sort of counterproductive. And so I think the ways are crucial to that conversation. Many of the other things are more, there's more flexibility to them, but I think the ways are something that just, be careful around those, maybe the best way that I could sort of say it. So those are my two comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Did anyone on the team want to talk about phasing? Do you have any preliminary thoughts? I mean, I know you said you mainly wanted to listen tonight, so I don't mean to put you on the spot, but.
Yeah, actually, this is Andy. If I could address that, we did actually discuss that with Sasaki, and although it is not something we take into account as much in the early schematic phase, we did discuss as one of our initial bullet lists of considerations, the fact that we do not want to, as Councilor Zeid mentioned, we do not want to impact the downtown and all the activities that go on during a typical construction season by having all this construction go on at once. So there's likely to be a sort of a phased approach to this, as the councilor mentioned. So we did raise that concern, and I think that while it may not alter the design of the park itself, it certainly will have some implications for how we break out the construction phasing with a contractor.
Well, I think he was also, we're trying to meter the spending too. So I don't want that to go unsaid.
Understood.
All right, Councilor McCauley.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, folks from Sasaki. I appreciate the time that you spent learning a little bit about what we're doing here. I appreciate some of these comments that you've made, particularly to the connectivity and the active and inclusive nature of the park. I, for one, look forward to your conceptual ideas as well. My question really comes from when do you think the community engagement process will begin? I know that you'll have some options for us to look at, but sometimes in the past what we've had is here's the option, you should like it because this is what we're going with, and what I heard today is that you want to present options and you want to solicit feedback. So when can, from our standpoint, when can we start to condition our constituents that there might be some conceptual ideas? And I'm not looking for a firm date, but just, is it middle of August? Is it something like that? That's where I'm going with that and why. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Again, if there are initial responses from the team, let us know, but if not, that's okay.
Yeah, I think, Kate, do you want to address that? I think we talked a little bit about the time frame for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think not to pin us down exactly, but I would say early summer, kind of late June, early July would be a time where we'd be looking to come to the public again with many options. And again, I would just stress that our goal would not be to present options that we ask people to choose their favorite. We find that tends to put you all in a bind. But instead to ask, here are many different ways of thinking about the waterfront. Which is most successful when it comes to bikes? Which is most successful in terms of its ability to host events? Which is best for the commercial fishing operations? And give people some really good ways to give us feedback on what works best. And then we can wrap that together with you into one refined concept that has the best ideas.
Thank you.
Before I call on the city engineer, I just have a question. So what if somebody wanted to email you now, or because that's a couple, it's maybe 5 weeks away.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, is there a way that they can contact Sasaki, Kate, maybe you personally, or what do you want to do?
Yeah, actually, this is Andy. If I could address that. We did actually update the project page on the city's website today, and we can make shortcuts for that wherever it might be helpful, social media or whatnot. But we have a default feedback page right now that will obviously be referred to the survey when Sasaki has that ready. But at this time, there's information here on the project at the Market Landing Park expansion link there. And in this particular instance, what you're seeing is the feedback form. So in the present time, even prior to that, members of the public can put their name, email address, and any comments or concerns they have. That will be compiled and can be shared with the ad hoc committee as well as the consultant as essentially a summary of those comments in tabular format.
Okay, so let's make sure that people know about that webpage. City Engineer John Eric White, please go ahead.
Yes. Can you hear me well?
Yep.
Yes.
Assuming that you can hear me. I just want to piggyback what Councilor Sharif has brought. The data gathering, Andy and Jordy, the various different. Let everyone know in this group listening that they are looking at the different phases of the of the construction of the boardwalks. And what I specifically want Sasaki to do, if at all possible within the scope, there's very particular sections that we have to wait till 2030. The most recent reconstructed part of the boardwalk will probably last until like 2030. But phase 2 is going to come up in the next few years. And then we have the outer edges, beyond the Black Cow, the old Black Cow, and that type of thing. So what would be really good is just a implement as part of your conceptual possible, phase 2 and phase 3 to address those changes in the phases in accordance with what Sharif is asking.
Yeah, but just one bit of caution though is the bulkhead itself is going to be out of their scope. So I'm not sure if they're going to be able to take on the actual boardwalk issue, but we'll coordinate that offline. I mean, definitely the city council's focused on it, looking at a big investment soon.
Yep, And just to be clear, the only thing I'm talking about, Counselor, is the fact that, you know, the boardwalk that was just replaced, it's definitely outside of their physical scope, absolutely. But our next round of renovations to that will be raising it like 5 feet, something like that. You know what I mean? So keep in mind that as they think about it, certain sections right in front of their project will be raised at different time frames. That's all. That's my
Oh,
main point.
well, no, then I'm really glad you brought that up because I'm not sure that everyone agrees that that's the way to go, is to, you know, jack it up 5 feet.
Yeah, I would agree with that in part. I guess John Eric I think raises a valid point, which is it's worth considering these factors. But I think at the end of the day, there's also an argument to be made that more flood storage capacity is there if you don't create a wall, essentially. So there are different factors of that. And I think the point that should be taken here, I think John Eric, you know, correctly makes, is that we need to consider future implications of sea level rise, as Sasaki had mentioned during their presentation. Whatever that solution ends up being, of course, we'll work out with the designers as we go forward. But I think John Eric was also pointing out or highlighting the fact that there needs to be integration with the adjacent, you know, properties as far as that goes.
Okay. All right. John Eric, did you have other thoughts? Get your hands up.
No, but I mean, I understand about letting it flood and the ebb and flow. And that is definitely a very serious consideration that we have to make. How do we want this to function? So that's the importance of Sharif's comment, is that over the next 60, 80 years, because of sea level rise, this project should have phases that we should be aware of. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Z has his hand up again.
Yeah, I'm just following again. So I'm completely agree. And it's interesting because we had Budget and Finance Committee a week ago or so, and we specifically asked about whether there was anticipated elevation change to the boardwalk as part of that bulkhead change, and the answer was no. The intent was to keep the boardwalk at the same height. So it just emphasizes the point that we better all get on the same page so that we are giving Sasaki the right inputs, because I can absolutely see, even if it's not in their scope, that it would be kind of weird to walk to the end of the park and then it's 5 feet taller at the end if we're not all on the same page. And then it brought up another thought in my mind too, that is in scope, and that is that we've had lengthy discussions in this ad hoc about getting the infrastructure under the park correct. And so I think that that's a very material discussion as well. You know, drainage, you know, there were conversations about electrical and all sorts of other things that run under there. And we know it's funny that we have big projects on both sides of this one. We have the bulkhead, but we also know we have a looming downtown infrastructure project problem all at the same time that's becoming more material with you know, some numbers starting to float around for design and so forth. So this is right in the middle of those two things. So I think that coordination is crucial, and I would even go so far as to suggest that I don't know if this is the right term, but you know, the tech review that's often the term I hear when projects go, where John Eric and other folks from DPS and water sewer, everybody kind of gets in there and just says, here's what we think may be worth considering, because I don't know, I'm not smart enough to know if you can build anything on top of anything else. Maybe you can't, and that could change some things about the park. So I think that awareness is crucial. I think that's what John Eric was getting at too, and I'm just expanding on it a little bit more just to give more context that projects actually all over the place right around this thing. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, I assume VHB and John Eric will having a lot of conversations. I mean, so I agree, that's going to be crucial.
Chair, if I could comment on that briefly. And John Eric has been helpful, extremely helpful to us in recent days, and will be helpful as we go forward, because we have actually put Sasaki in touch with DPS and the engineering division to look at conveying, as was Letitia had mentioned during the slide there, on Market Square, conveying the stormwater from Market Square through to the Merrimack River, and making sure that there aren't any obstructions, at least as far as this project scope is, so that in the future we have all the capacity we need for Market Square, for instance, and we'll be looking at that throughout the rest of the site as well. I think Councilor Z's point is well taken, that subsurface construction is important to us as well in this project.
Okay. Well, it looks like the committee members have all piped up. So let me see if anyone in the attendees, any members of the public want to raise their hands. Great. You just, when I call on you, please just give your name and address and spend a couple minutes. So Lon is up. I think you self-muted. I'm not in control. I'm sorry, I can't.
Yeah, Lon, you'll have to unmute on your end as well.
There we go.
There you
Does
go.
that work?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, good. Lon Hockmeister, 281 High Road, Newbury. I'm also on the board of the Committee for an Open Waterfront. You guys did a really good job. I had, I think, 11 questions, and I've only got 2 left. So thank you, Sharif, for bringing up ways to the water. That's something that I particularly will be watching really closely. I'd like to see 2 more than we have in the drawing right now. Regarding elevations, and we're talking, I think the one comment there said through 2100 they were considering. So the high point of that area is basically the firehouse at about plus 14 feet. If you go east and west from there on Water and Merrimack Streets, you're down to about 12 on each side. The low point in front of the water is 6 foot on the west, plus 6 feet, and plus 8 feet on the east side. My concern, and when we did our model of the waterfront, we put fill in and brought everything up to 10 feet. That may not be even enough. That's about the height of the berms right now, about 10 feet, excuse me. But that's something to consider. The other thing in talking elevations, I was wondering if you were going to consider the drainage from Water Street, the flooding issues there, and Market Landing Park, what do you call it? Yeah, Market Landing, and apparently you're addressing that too. So that was one that was taken care of. One other comment on the Waterfront Trust has said that they, this was mentioned by one of the people from Sasaki, but the bicycles going through the park, Waterfront Trust said on their property they were going to require people to walk their bikes, get off and walk their bikes through the park itself. They could ride when it was adjacent to the parking lots or through the parking lots, but they have to get off and walk. So that's just a comment that they might keep in mind. And I don't know that that's still a demand by the trust. That's all I've got. I'm looking forward for an opportunity to participate. That's all I can say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other attendees? Not seeing any other hands. Oh, now here's one. Jane Snow.
Good evening, Jane Snow, 9 Coffin Street. I appreciate all the comments, and I'm glad to see that you gentlemen are taking care of all the technical issues of sea level rise and all those things. The one thing that I would just ask, as I look at this quickly, I see a lot of designs to help, gatherings and festivals and things like that. But I would hope that we keep a large area of the park available to the residents all the time. We have great groups of people that go down on Sunday and sit on top of the berm and those lawn chairs and enjoy it. And I would hope that those kinds of areas and situations would be kept in mind as we develop the park. And I also agree with the gentleman that I don't think bicycles in that area are going to work well together. And I think a perfect example is on the rail trails. We have difficulties there. So if that's going to be a real gathering, busy place, I'm not sure that that would work in that particular spot. But thank you for all that you do. I'm looking forward to seeing more designs and getting more information. And it's a great start. I love it. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we go back to the panelists, because there are a couple of people with hands up, anyone else in the attendees? Not right now. Okay. Mayor Holliday has been waiting. Mayor Holliday.
Thank you. I would like to just express my appreciation to Saki. I think that from just the limited comments we've received tonight, that I think we can recognize that they are really on top of the areas of concern for the city. For me, I agree with Sharif and with John Eric White. Drainage is really important. and storm surge. And I don't want you as a design team to be concerned about working with us if then all of a sudden things become outside of your scope, and that you are concerned about issues that we need to address outside of the scope as a city. And I want you to be really honest with us about that and raise those concerns early on in terms of what we need to address and work with you around that. We have major drainage issues in Market Square. There's no question about it. And how that impacts your design as we go forward and address some of the storm surge issues. I just wanted to be sure to say that tonight. But I know we have picked the right team to work with us. I'm really pleased at what you have done in a very short period of time. And I think it's obvious from Lon, who said he had, 14 questions, you addressed most of them. And I know that you will be a good team to work with our city to move this 3-decade project forward. So thank you. But I really can't emphasize enough how concerned I am about a drainage and storm surge in this area. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Elizabeth Harris. I think you're muted on your end, I believe. No, not coming on. Elizabeth, if you're, we can circle back. John Eric, did you, oh, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
There you go. Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, yes, well, it's very exciting. I love to see the progress, and the public input that you're providing is heartening. I am one of those interested in the ways. A couple of comments. Ferry Wharf Way, I noticed there's a slight elbow. It doesn't go directly. I don't know if that is something that's needed, but I think it's important at least to have the visual, both from Market Square to the river along Ferry Wharf Way and from the river going back to Market Square. Good to look at it from both directions. And then Central Wharf Way is sort of tricky with the settlement. It seems to be pretty wide. And I just hope you'll look at that carefully too in your planning for the ways going forward.
Thank you. Okay, Mayor, did you mean to have your hand up still? Or no? All right, well, we've been at it about an hour. I think we've exhausted our talking back to the team. Maybe the team would like to take it from here.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Chair. So we actually wanted to speak now to our next steps. And this is, again, working with Sasaki, this is sort of a snapshot bullet list. So we're in continuation of tasks 1 through 6 in the scope of services. And what we're going to see going forward is really summarized by these 4 bullets here. So Sasaki's presentation of concept alternatives, there's a minimum of 3 required by contract. We'll see what Sasaki has for us. And then we'll have rough cost estimates associated with those. We'll have a survey and public forum for broader public input, as Kate mentioned, over a couple of months towards the summer timeframe. And then the city, through the committee's review of the alternatives and vetting of that, in part based on the public feedback we receive. And then after that, selection and refinement of the preferred alternative, whatever that may be, the elements that we think make sense, and a refinement of that cost estimate, which will be used by us for various different things, including budgeting for the project, applying for grants, and so forth. And then after that, obviously, after this fall timeframe, again, going back to that diagram of the process, we'll have the tasks 7 through 9. So this is after September timeframe, really. After the schematic design phase is complete, doing the detailed design, permitting, funding, bidding for construction. That's the public bidding processes we have to follow. And then the construction oversight. And that's because Sasaki as designers would help us with the oversight of the contractor to make sure that they conform to all the plans and the design intent. So those are kind of our next steps going forward. Again, this is the diagram of that design, that process, just so folks can keep that in mind. That's your rough timeline there. We will expedite, obviously, in getting to construction as soon as we can. A lot of that will come down to finalizing the schematic plan, the funding for construction, and I think the funding for construction is something we've already started working on. We do have a request in this year to the Preservation Committee for $250,000 towards construction, and we will supplement that with further requests in the coming year, as well as state grants. And we have reached out to the trust fund commissioners regarding one fund here that we already have. So we'll cobble funds together from various different sources for the construction end of this project. As far as the feature updates and comments, as the chair mentioned earlier, there is a way to provide feedback in between even the public meetings that can be shared with the ad hoc committee members and the consultants. So folks can go to the city's website. We will work to get a link on the main page as well to make it convenient. But underneath the planning and development page, there is a Market Landing Park project page. Updates will be posted there as we move along with deliverables. That's the sort of presentation materials and plans and so forth we get from Sasaki. Those will be posted there for the public to view as we get them, and including today's presentation will get up there probably tomorrow morning as well. And then there's a public comment form. So that's the way for the public to, in the interim even, give us comments. We know there's a lot of historical comments that all of us are familiar with, but for current comments, folks can go there and submit those comments, and we will compile those for the ad hoc committee and Sasaki to consider in the coming weeks and months.
Great. Okay, so we're going to let the team go off and do their work, but I do want to encourage the team to heed what the mayor said, which is do not be shy. I mean, she's very graciously offered staff time if there's something that's missing, and putting together this ad hoc. You know, they're not everybody's on the call tonight, but you know, we have the harbor master, we have the parking clerk. I mean, they're really all here you know, to help you problem solve. And if there's any way the council can help, just pick up the phone and let us know. But you know, this is such a long time coming. I think we're all, you should sense the excitement that we feel we're close to actually solving the puzzle. All right, anything else? I don't know when we'll have our next meeting. It's really going to be dependent on, you know, how quickly Sasaki can draw something up and get back to us. But please stay in touch through that web page. And then of course, you know, this meeting is recorded and it gets posted with the notice of the meeting for those that missed it. And I guess that's it. How about a motion to adjourn from one of the members?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call. Councillor Zede,
Yes.
Councillor Shand,
Yes.
Councillor McCauley,
Yes.
and I'm voting yes. Thank you very much for an efficient meeting. We're very excited. Glad to have you on board. See you soon.
Thank you. Good
Thank you
night.
so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Good night.